Welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Episode 250. That's 250 consecutive Mondays that I've posted this podcast. Sort of proud of that streak. That's a good one. A lot of people have helped me make that happen, but when you say it like that, it's hard to believe that almost 5 years have gone by since we started this podcast, or I did with Mikkel, my assistant coach at the time. But let me begin this episode by thanking my loyal listeners. I don't have the largest listenership among golf podcasts, that's for sure. But I would imagine my listeners are probably the most consistent and maybe the most faithful listeners. It probably doesn't hurt that every week on a Monday morning I post this podcast, so the people who listen to it often kind of know what to expect and when to expect it. But all that to say, I want to tell all of you listeners that get in there every week and listen to what we have to offer. I want to say a big thank you, and hopefully we can do another 250 more in a row. But I would be remiss if I started this podcast without actually giving a shout out to my original inspiration to start this project. That was my former assistant coach, Mikkel Bjerch-Andresen. Mikkel had played for Baylor and was a senior my very first year at Baylor in 2014-2015 season. He went on to have a coaching career, and then he landed in Waco about 2 months after COVID hit. So he got hired in the middle of the COVID. He and I were sitting around all summer long trying to figure out things to do to keep Baylor golf relevant. If we didn't have a fall season, how would we keep our name out there with recruits that we couldn't go see at the time because recruiting had been limited? And he came up with the idea. He said, "Coach, what would you think about having a podcast?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I would think anything about that at all. I don't think I would do it. I'm not sure I could do it." And he goes, No, you could do it. And so through some coaxing and actually a pretty good sales job, he's very persuasive, and that's probably why he was such a great recruiter when he was in college golf. But Mikkel talked me into doing this, and I think we posted our first podcast on August 8th. He was very helpful early on with actually co-hosting it with me, and then eventually I started doing it myself. But he mixed it. He did all the technological things that have to be done to it, and he encouraged me every week. I mean, every week Mikkel was saying, "Hey, do you have a guest for next week?" And I would say, "No." He said, "Well, you better find one." And so he would encourage me to call. He made out a big list of people he thought I should call: coaches, players, current players, former players, tour players, guys I didn't even coach that I had relationships with. So it was like, I think Mikkel really drove this podcast early on. Not sure if there's any chance it would have made it to 250 weeks in a row if it hadn't been for Mikkel. Mikkel, in 2023, took his family back to Norway. He and his wife and 2 boys are living in Oslo, and he's doing very, very well, still very connected to golf. I mean, he is a brilliant golf mind, sort of a savant in the world of golf. Mikkel is just really, really knows a lot about the game, and I hope he stays connected to golf forever and ever. He's great. He was great for me as an assistant coach, and as I said, he was the biggest reason this podcast got going initially and kept the momentum going with it. So thank you, Mikkel. Today's podcast will start with an update of Baylor graduates currently playing professional golf. About a month ago or so, a little over a month ago, Ryan Grider, who graduated in spring of 21, won his very first start on the PGA Tour Americas and is currently number 2 on the Fortinet Cup list, which was won by Johnny Kiefer, also a Baylor Bear, last year. But Ryan's in really good shape, playing great golf, probably the best of his life. Also on that PGA Tour Americas tour is Brandon Hoff, who graduated in 2022. We didn't have any scholarship for him the next year. He transferred to Oral Roberts University, and he was Conference Player of the Year and did some really amazing things for Oral Roberts. So he's a Baylor Bear and an Oral Roberts alum, if you will. But Brandon is showing steady progress as he continues to compete on that tour, and I'm sure he and Ryan are seeing a lot of each other out there, or currently where those tournaments are being played. Another player who's a former Baylor Bear, Cooper Dossie, who was a 2-time All-American, played on the Arnold Palmer Cup team here at Baylor. He was a 2021 graduate also. He has made 5 of the 9 cuts on the Korn Ferry Tour this year. Started with sort of conditional status, but I don't know what the number is anymore, but he's going to do his best to keep that card and or play well enough to earn a PGA Tour card, but he's 80th on the list currently. And finally, 3-time Baylor Golf All-American Johnny Kiefer, who won the Fortinet Cup on the PGA Tour University or Tour Americas last year. He won his first Korn Ferry event 2 weeks ago in the Veritex Bank Championship up in Dallas. Johnny's currently number 2 on the Korn Ferry points list and has just played some amazing golf. I think he's missed 1 cut as a professional since June of 2024. He has played so very well, representing us great out there. I know he sees Cooper Dossie a lot on that tour, and I think it's just great. I want to wish all of our former players the very best as they continue their competitive journey. Sic 'em Bears. Recently, in the office, my assistant coach, Ryan Murphy, and I were talking about success, failure, why some players make it, why others don't. And we started sort of thinking about what is it that really, he asked my opinion, like, why do you think some players have made it that you coached and others didn't? I gave my opinions. One of the things that I do know is that the players who make it persevere through all sorts of disappointments, miscuts, playing in small towns, staying in a Motel 6 and missing the cut in one of those events, but they just survive so much. But basically, I've always believed it's because inside them, in their DNA, what they are, something says, hey, I'm a golfer. And they don't really consider anything else. They might get a degree, they might have a backup plan, but they're not thinking about that backup plan. A lot of times when a guy says, I'll try pro golf for a year or so, and if I don't make it, I'll do. No. Don't say it that way. It's not, I'll try it for a while, and if I don't make it, I'll do something else. You think to yourself, and these players that made it all never considered anything but this is what I'm going to do. So that's one of the considerations that I felt like that all of the players that I've coached that have made it had, is just a firm self-belief, this is what I'm going to do for a living. But as we continue to talk, Coach Murphy and I, it got me to thinking about a speech that Claude Harmon III gave at the 2018 GCAA Coaches Convention that I was attending in Las Vegas. And I couldn't remember exactly what he had said, but I remember I loved the speech. So I searched back in one of my Stuff That Works journals and came upon the notes that I took that day. So I'd like to share those notes with you right now. I'm going literally straight from the notes. This is Claude Harmon's note, or his speech to a group of golf coaches. There were about 300 golf coaches there. So I'm going to give him high marks on this. One, he literally spoke to us with the intent of us having information we could take back to our campus, things about players he had worked with that worked for him, characteristics of why players make it and why others don't. And literally, he started this speech by why players don't make it. And so that's what, when Ryan Murphy and I were in the office talking about this, why some make and some don't make it, it reminded me, I think Claude Harmon talked about this. And some of this is not said tongue-in-cheek, but it's sort of, he talks about how superficial a lot of kids are, a lot of junior golfers and even college golfers and young professionals are. Talked about having all the fanciest, latest, and greatest golf shafts, 3 or 4 Scotty Cameron putters, super exotic driver shaft. His dad is probably very, very involved, or maybe over-involved in the game. The kid he's been so obsessed with hitting golf shots and hitting the ball 320 yards that he really hasn't developed a short game. He might say that he didn't make it in college golf because the coach didn't like him, or the parent may say that the coach didn't like my son. He might own his own TrackMan or GC Quad or both. But those were some of the things he said that were the superficial reasons why they just don't make it, because they aren't looking at the game the way he thinks you should look at the game in order to make it. He talked about instruction, and I'll preface this by saying I've always kind of looked at instruction. I know there's great instruction out there. There's wonderful instructors teaching the game of golf, but instruction, since they've quantified it, they've monetized it in a big, big way, it's kind of taken on a different tinge or whatever, if you will, for me through the years. But anyway, Claude Harmon said he feels like when he's trying to teach somebody, he finds the cancer in a golf swing, one thing, and find 10 ways to say it instead of working on 10 different things. So a lot of people are they get too much instruction. They get too many things to work on. It's very, very difficult. And if you're the student and you've got a bunch of different things to work on and you can't figure out what is going to help you, what's not going to help you. So instruction, be careful that you make sure that you either, if you're teaching, that the student isn't getting too much, and if you're the student, that you kind of simplify this thing down and get 2 or 3 things to work on at max. Also, with regard to instruction, your student doesn't care how much you know; he just wants to get better. So it's not a presentation like, look how impressive I am as the instructor or the coach. That's a college coach included there. That doesn't matter. He just wants to get better. That's his goal. Claude himself doesn't care what the swing looks like, but is it repeatable? And that reminded me that when he was telling us that in the convention at that speech, it reminded me, I immediately went to Jim Furyk. I immediately went to Miller Barber. Heck, I went to Arnold Palmer and Lee Trevino. I mean, you could go to a bunch of golf swings that aren't aesthetically that pleasing, but produced great golf. They could repeat them. And I think Jim Furyk had one of the most repeatable golf swings in recent memory, certainly in the last 30 or 40 years. It was very repeatable. He trusted it, and he knew where his golf ball was going. Claude went on to say, with respect to our players, so he's talking to the coaches, and he's saying, your players are awful at acting like athletes. They don't know how to act like an athlete. In a team sport, you sit them on the bench, and then they figure it out. Coaches, you college golf coaches, need to hold your players more accountable for mistakes that they make in practice. And I hadn't thought about that. It's like I let them make all these mistakes in practice and or qualifying, and there's no... I mean, he goes to the tournament, sometimes by default, but you actually have to hold the players accountable to that. And if they're an athlete, as I said, great athletes want to be coached. They're very coachable, and they don't mind being told hard truths straight away. He talked about certain characteristics of elite players. They're highly self-motivated, so you as the coach shouldn't have to do much to get them in that space. They manage chaos well. It takes a lot to break them. I mean, a lot to break them. So he was giving a bunch of characteristics of why these players are elite. In other words, why some make it and others don't. When he talked about working with Brooks Koepka, he said, my goal would be to make Brooks a one-dimensional golfer in the world, the best one-dimensional golfer in the world. To do the same thing each time you swing the club, you have repeatability, which Brooks obviously did. He gave a Nick Saban quote that I really liked, and I copied it down. It said, this is Claude Harmon quoting Nick Saban. It's not human nature to be great. It's human nature to survive and to be average and to do what you have to do to get by. That is normal. When you have something good happen, it's the special people that can stay focused and keep paying attention to detail, working to get better, and not being satisfied with what they have already accomplished. Pretty good quote right there. He did say that the only person who can put pressure on me is me. And he said a lot of people don't make it because they break down from the outside pressures, but they also put their own pressure on them, self-imposed pressure. He said Brooks Koepka told him, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and that means even hitting a cut shot on this dogleg left, no matter the chaos. He's going to do what he's going to do, and I think Brooks has done an amazing job of that throughout his career. When he said when working with a player, whether you're a swing instructor or a coach or both, when these are the questions you should ask when working with a player. Can a player consistently start the ball where they want? I mean, that is an absolute paramount. Tons of players I work with have no idea how to start the ball in line. Does a player have a repeatable shot shape? Is he doing the same thing every time? Does the player have strength? Is he strong? Will a change help or hurt him? it reminded me of John Duncan in 1931 literally said, when I'm working with a player, I try to touch as little as I can in the golf swing. And so what he's saying there is, this change going to help or is it going to hurt the player? What information does the player even need to know? What will the player improve if I change what he does naturally? That's a big question. And does the data match my instincts? He said players struggle also because they are making golf harder. They need to be great at something or must find a true strength. Scott Verplank always told me that he said he knew he had a lot of things going against him. He wasn't a big guy, didn't hit it very far, but he always knew where the ball was going. He could repeat it. He knew it wasn't going left, so it was always going to be moving left to right. And he said that was a strength of his, and obviously chipping and putting was a huge strength for Scott Verplank. But find your strength, accentuate it, and then eventually work on those weaknesses and make them strengths if you can. But he said another reason players struggle is always making swing changes. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute when I'm through with Claude's speech, but instruction, obviously. Two great players who have recognized their strengths are, he said, Bryson DeChambeau and Bubba Watson. Now, Bryson, he said, doesn't care that you don't get him. He believes that he believes all that he does will make him better. That's a great self-belief, and he does it his way. Bubba Watson, he doesn't see a straight shot. That's his strength. He looks at an area and then tries to figure out how to curve his ball into that area. So he's mentioned both Bryson and Brooks, two very unique golfers doing it their own way. And then he said one other thing to tell your players. Focusing on outliers, that's why people fail, because they try to model themselves after these guys like like Bubba or Brooks or Bryson, and instead of creating their own version of their best self. So it's a very unique path that you're living, a very unique journey that you're on as a player. Yes, you can take things from instructors and from coaches and from other players, but you've got to be yourself and authentic to that. And then finally, he said the main reason a lot of kids struggle, a lot of college golfers struggle, is when they get addicted to instruction and they play golf swing instead of playing golf. And we've all heard that 100 or more times, but it's true. You've got to do it. You must have a repeatable shape. These guys had it, and they were all very successful. And he mentioned Jack Nicklaus, Colin Montgomery, David Duval, Billy Casper, Tom Lehman, Bruce Litsky, Kenny Perry. He just went down a list of guys that were all successful with a shot shape. He said both Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson have no rearview mirror. They're always looking forward, and that was a big reason that some guys don't make it, is they're always looking back at something bad that happened. These guys move forward well, and they move forward quickly, and they move forward fairly easily, apparently. Need to constantly help your players with their attitude. Help your player to find the best version of himself. I thought this speech that Claude Harmon III gave was actually great. I thought it was good enough to write it down, and I know I've used a lot of these things he said with players in the last 6 years. So I just appreciate that. And it got me to thinking, when I read that, it got me to thinking some more things about this conversation Ryan Murphy and I had been having. But practice versus playing. I think a lot of kids don't make it because they think the more you practice, the better you're going to play. And yes, there is a place for block practice. There is a place for working on technique. There is that time, and I don't think that's pretty much non-negotiable. You have to do a certain amount of that. But I still believe you need to play more than you practice. One of the best players I coached at Oklahoma State was Ricky Fowler, and he did practice. He definitely worked on his game at times, but he loved playing. So the kids literally stand on a driving range, perfect lies, I mean, literally like a laboratory, almost in a video screen, and practice that way all the time. In a recent tournament, I overheard a coach whose player said to him, "Hey, coach, this is crazy. Why are all the lies on this course so unlevel?" And I looked at that coach, and he and I both smiled. That boy actually asked that question. Why are all the lies on this course so unlevel? Well, he had been so used to just practicing on a perfect range tee that he really didn't consider all these different shots he was going to have to play. It might be a silly crazy example, but I actually heard it. Players hitting 7 irons for 2 hours until they know they hit that 7 iron 176 yards from a perfect lie is silly. I'll ask the player a lot of times, Jimmy, how many 176-yard 7 irons are you going to have off a perfectly flat lie in this next tournament? His answer is usually maybe one, and I'm saying maybe one. Players truly need to understand you rarely get a perfect stock yardage. The player wanting to improve knows his stock yardage with each club, but he works on adapting to off yardages, different wind directions, and varying lies. In other words, he trains for adaptability. We should all play more golf. That would be one thing that could really improve and be a reason a guy makes it instead of not making it. Another reason players struggle, in my opinion, is by becoming addicted to instruction, which I alluded to earlier, by trying to perfect their technique. I mean, it's going to be a perfect technique, and on video, it will look absolutely perfect. And I was quoted years ago as saying to a player, and I'll just call him Jimmy again, Jimmy, that's okay. You can be on plane here in Waco, or you can be on the plane with the team headed to the next tournament. It's your choice, Jimmy. Which plane do you want on? Now, I realize it's okay to be on plane. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it becomes such an obsession, you forget that you're playing the game. That's crazy. I'm not against instruction, as I said earlier, or working on technique, or a certain amount of block practice. All of that's fine. But a player's obsession with a perfect swing can often lead to golfing disaster, and is often really the long way around in a player's development. It takes a lot longer to get there. There's a lot more scar tissue on that highway. Bob Tway, who won, I think, 8 times on the PGA Tour, he won the PGA Championship one year, was a great player and a good friend of mine. He once told me, and I wrote this down in my Stuff That Works journal as well, he said, don't ever become too dependent on someone else for all your answers. And I think what he was alluding to was that he had believed that golf instruction and putting his whole game in somebody else's hands was a good idea at one time, but he learned the hard way that didn't work. I thought that was one of the greatest quotes, really, that I've ever heard with respect to accountability, owning your game, owning your golf swing, and being, your own unique person. Stephen Amick, a golf instructor in Dallas, once told me, he said, that when you take instruction, you need to make sure that whatever you're hearing from the instructor appeals to your sense of good judgment. If it doesn't, you need to either discard it or ask the instructor for a little bit more information. How is this going to help me? What am I supposed to accomplish with this? Where am I going with this? And Pablo Martin, who played for me at Oklahoma State, was a 3-time All-American and, College Player of the Year, and he won 3 times on the European Tour. Pablo didn't take golf lessons growing up. He did later, but, he would look at the kids that were obsessed with their golf swing, obsessed with perfect technique, and literally couldn't go a week without a golf lesson. And he would ask them, he'd say, you just need to be careful what you're listening to. There's a lot of good instruction out there, he said, and there's a lot that's not good. But to always remember this. Remember, your teacher, he's teaching for a reason, and you're the one playing. So he's trying to remind you, you're the player. So that teacher has to understand that in order for you to develop your game, you still have to own what's being said, what's being taught, and what you're learning right there. Pablo Martin, great wisdom. All right, now back to my conversation with Coach Murphy in the office a couple weeks ago. We started to make this list of golfers we thought, wow, how did that guy ever make it? Or why did he make it? Or he's not big, he doesn't hit it far, how has he made it? So we kind of started coming up with reasons, and we're kind of making this into a project. The project's been tabled here for a minute, but we named some players: Fred Funk, Jim Furyk, David Edwards, Zach Johnson, Jeff Sluman, Corey Paving, David Thompson. We just went on and on and on, and that's just a start. But making that list got me to thinking about another really good example that Ryan Murphy or I had not mentioned, and that was Jim Colbert. A lot of people from this generation have no idea who Jim Colbert was. He was an amazing player, very successful. I think he won 8 times on the PGA Tour. He had 72 top 10s. He won 20 times on the Champions Tour, 2-time Champions Tour Player of the Year, and 2 times Champions Tour Money List winner. He was 5'9", 170, not a huge guy, didn't hit it a ton, but he played a lot of professional golf for a long time and played it very, very well. And when I mentioned him, it got me to thinking of a story from the 2003 NCAA Central Regional. I was the assistant coach at Oklahoma State at the time. Mike Holder was the head coach. And we were sent to Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas for the regional at Colbert Hills, designed by Jim Colbert. The course was probably 2 or 3 years old. Honestly, a very, very beautiful golf course. Sand dunes everywhere. It's built for wind. I mean, it needs some wind to really, really make it super challenging, but it was a beautiful golf course in great condition. So we go through the practice round, and we knew that we had to attend a banquet that night where Jim Colbert was going to speak. And I didn't know Jim Colbert. I'd seen him on television for a lot of years. I could tell he was a very competitive guy, but he also came across, and Mike Holder felt the same thing. We felt like he came across a little cocky or brash, kind of. I don't know. It just always turned me off the way he responded to putts going in or just things that were happening on the golf course. Very unfair to judge that guy because I'd never met Jim Colbert, but I was going to get to listen to him speak that night. And Mike Holder and I were talking that, we're not real excited about this. Now, we had to be there at the speech, at the banquet, because we were part of the tournament. And both of us were just a little bit hesitant about listening. We expected a lot of talk about himself, about how great his career was, about how great a player he was and is. But looking back, we couldn't have been more wrong about Jim Colbert. So he spoke on a ton of subjects relative to how you make yourself into a good player, or how you can persevere through this, or the disappointment that's coming, the things you need to maximize. I mean, a lot of really, really good things. But part of that speech I'm going to bring to you right here, right now. And that was when he talked about, he said, a lot of people think a career is a long time. I think he played in over 600 golf tournaments and made the cut in around 420 or so. So he played a lot of golf tournaments on the tour for a long time. But he said, and this is how he explained it. He says, I think instead of talking about individual accomplishments I had, I think I'd rather talk to you about how I looked at each season. And so he said, basically, every season I'd play in around 30 tournaments. Of that season, I knew that probably 8 tournaments, I'm really going to have my A game. I mean, I'm going to have my stuff. This is the game that, you could win with. This is the best you play. This is when your game is in great shape. He said about 8 times a year, I'll have that. And so during those times, I put the pedal to the metal. I mean, I absolutely went there and did everything I could to maximize that great golf that I had. Wasn't afraid of it. It was like, this is awesome. I'm playing my best golf, and I'm going to do everything I can to get in contention on Sunday afternoon and have a chance to win. He said, I did a really good job of that when I had my game. But I also knew that about 8 of those 30 tournaments, I probably wouldn't have any game at all. It was like really struggling with your game for whatever reason, short game, putting, hitting it sideways or whatever it is. About eight tournaments a year, you wouldn't have your game. So my goal when I had my game was to get in contention for Sunday afternoon and be there, at the end. But when I didn't have my game, my goal was to figure out how to make the cut. And he said, usually I could make the cut of those 8 tournaments, probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 times. So when you really didn't have your game, figure out a way to make the cut and make a check. The other 14 tournaments, he said, were a bit of a mixed bag. I'd miss the cut sometimes, play great and get in contention other times. But I did it with just my normal game. So what he was saying is he broke the season up into basically thirds and said, some of the time I'm going to have it, some I'm not, and I'm going to maximize both of those. And then I just thought that was a great way of putting it. Hadn't heard it put that way. And quite frankly, he didn't talk about himself at all. Truly, he didn't. He was talking about figuring out a way to be your best, to have the best version of yourself. Again, He played football growing up. He wasn't picked to be this great player, but he had one of the great careers in Champions Tour history, and he was a really solid tour player for over 20 years. So when I think of Jim Colbert in that list that Ryan Murphy and I are making, I think I can probably find 100 names from all time that you're going to go, how did this guy make it? I wish somebody would write a book. I mean, it would be great to figure out how Zach Johnson took the career everybody thought he might have and turned it into a Hall of Fame career with 2 majors and 15 tournament titles. But basically what I wanted to give you during this deal was that everybody's journey is unique and everyone's formula is different. As players, you should learn what you can from swing coaches, from your college coach, and observe what players better than you are doing. However, carve your own unique path. You'll be way more successful, and you'll probably enjoy the journey a great deal more. Thanks again for joining me on Better Than I Found It. Look forward to seeing you next week.